go for the pedal kit. Don't go for the automated zip tie trigger, right? I should really change this and put the trigger on there. Hey y'all, when I buy tools like these here, I buy with value in mind. And I've got high aspirations, and what I'll tell you is you can build really high quality race car type stuff with value brand tools, and just a few small tips that I'll share with you today and modifications that we might make that'll get you, I think, doing 90% of the stuff that all the people with big, very expensive tools will be able to do themselves. So I make a lot of stuff out of steel and metal, and all of it goes into the car pretty much. And what I'm going to tell you is I buy for value and I prioritize where I spend my dollars. First, you know, as much as I love these things from Mittler Brothers, this was a real spring for me. Kind of the same thing on the Everlast welder and the water cooler, a big spring purchase for me. But mostly what I end up buying is stuff that's a little bit more value oriented. So Harbor Freight, Northern Tool, you know, Summit Racing has got a couple of nice value tools. Really, actually, when you look at them, they're all made at the same factory, kind of overseas, and then they're branded differently when they get here. My priority is first building a safe vehicle, safe car, safe gate, fence, all this other projects, right? Whatever I'm building, I need to make sure that it's safe, functional, reliable, all that sort of deal. And that's number one. So I'm going to buy the very best parts and material that I can for those projects before I really get too wrapped up in, well, what label is on my bender, or do I have a full-size bandsaw, or is this the 24 or 36-inch bead roller? I tell you, some of this is like setting, you know, I'm just going to be honest, like my own personal ego aside, because I'm going to tell you, I want those name brand things, but more than that, I want to drive my darn car. I want to drive my truck, and I want to do all those things and enjoy them thoroughly for a long time, and to do so safely. So that means making decisions on where I spend my dollars here in the shop to accomplish those ends. It's a pretty casual episode, so you know we're drinking beer. Of course, Manhattan Project Quarter Life. It's a fantastic one. This is the first piece of sheet metal working stuff that I bought, a 30-inch. What I think this is a duct brake. I think that this is what AC people use to make duct work. And there's nothing really fancy about it, but I had to put a piece of plate on here because I'm gonna tell you, this dude will bend. You wanna go put a piece of 18 gauge in here that's wider than 10, 12 inches, something like that. This says it'll bend 30 inches. I am here to tell you it will not. If you don't have just a nice piece of flat plate on here, I think I cut this out with just a plasma cutter and just MIG welded it in, no big deal. Other than that, you just keep it clean, keep it on the fixture table, and it bends pretty nicely. The other cool thing is this can also be a little bit of a radius bender. If you just change from the plate that they give you, which this is pretty wobbly and weak, you gotta clamp the snot out of it. If you put on like a piece of square rectangle tube that's got a nice radius on it, you can get some pretty good radius bends on here. Man, I bet if you looked all the way through a car and you said, what are the parts that I cannot make with a 30-inch sheet metal brake, you probably count on one hand, really, the bends and the parts that you can't make using a small brake. And when you get to those, by the way, just get out your Googler. And you just look up your local sheet metal shop and they will press brake stuff for you. Just go to them with a rough drawing. Those are the folks that you need to know. Now, not everything really you have to buy as a modification. Some stuff you just need to go out and buy a nice piece of gear, right? And the reason I like this bandsaw, that is a Milwaukee bandsaw on a swag table base, you need to look up swag because these guys actually really know what they're doing. That they take regular tools, like really accessible tools like this bandsaw, and they put it on a stand. And I'm going to tell you, I haven't run across stuff that I can't make in this yet. It's a short list, right? And you get into fenders for the truck and a couple of other things. We needed a deeper, you know, draw to be able to really cut those out. But everything that I've built on the car so far, I've been able to do here on this. And I'm just going to tell you, first of all, these are very accessible. The blades are everywhere. I went to Home Depot the other day and bought a replacement set of blades. I would also recommend, once you get this stand, don't do like I've done. This is actually a friend's. And go for the pedal kit. Don't go for the automated zip tie trigger, right? Now, and I think when you get into like actually needing to go and spend some money, you actually, we're going to pause that for just a second. And we should talk about what I didn't have to spend any money on. Honestly, this is my grandfather's anvil, and after he passed, this was in the garage, and we were cleaning stuff out, right, like you do. And this was one of these things that was just nobody wanted, and I was perfectly happy to take it. And for a long time, like a number of years, really, when I had just first built the garage and was getting to do a little bit of building, I didn't have any real use for it. But then, you know, you get into metal shaping and you need to have, you know, the ability to work. You need to every now and then just have something to work against. And the fun part about it is not just, oh, hey, I've got an anvil for that, but keep your eyes open, and who knows where you'll be able to find gear like this. Maybe at a yard sale, you know, maybe there's one in your family that you can put to some renewed use like I've been able to do here. I'm real proud of this English wheel. And this is just a Northern Tool English wheel, which means it's a Harbor Freight English wheel, which means it's a kata or something or other on Amazon. Like, this English wheel is made elsewhere and branded like 20 different ways once it gets here. Who cares? The point being is this will bend 18 gauge all day long, and I'm just going to tell you, on a car for projects like us, there's not a lot more that we need. Now you get into doing like metal shaping if that's something you want to do more as a craft and you know, do it a little bit more professionally, I suppose. You might outgrow this. But I think the ceiling on what regular folk like us can do with tools like this is pretty darn tall. I have modified this, and I learned it from when I was hanging out with my buddy Greg in Austin. Greg, who broke the engine in my truck. And what we were doing is I was hanging out with him, and he had this all put together the way that you're supposed to, which these legs here on the back, the outriggers, actually go forward. And that's because, you know, the front end is really heavy and the back end is kind of a stabilizer. It frustrated me to no end. I kept bumping into those outriggers with my boots. And so I said, well, I'm going to assemble mine backwards. And I did it by accident to start, but I knew I wanted them backwards so that I could have a clear working space and standing space. But it gets really, really tippy, right? Because there's all this weight up at the front, and you've got just the outriggers back here. Well, in order to balance it, you just, this should come in the kit, right? In order to balance it, you just put a big block crankshaft. You just hang it off the back, and lo and behold, things are pretty stable. This is probably actually a 60-pound crankshaft. If you can find that and stick it off the back, you're in great shape. The other thing is you want to make sure that when you set up your English wheel, you've got provision for a rubber band. Do yourself a favor, really. Make sure that you've got your rubber band, but don't set it up with a pin to come on and off 100 different times. This upper anvil is actually pretty heavy, so I just have this set up to where I can undo the rubber band and move it up here to the top, out of the way. You don't have to use an MP241 front output. It's just what I had, but you know, it's a scrap piece laying around. I got to reuse it on this piece of gear, and it was pretty cool. The thing that I really like about this is overall it's got good capacity. It took a couple of nice modifications like what I wanted. You've got a whole wheel here. These are made of these are chromoly wheels. They're not hardened, but they're plenty hard for, you know, working with mild steel and aluminum like what most of us are going to use. And I just think this is a great piece of great high value piece of gear. Okay, last but certainly not least, there's actually a modification we need to do to this next tool, but I'm going to talk to you about it here just for a second because I've been real happy working with it. Very high value, and I think you guys would have seen in the previous video, I was actually able to make some pretty cool stuff with it. I mean, cool by my standards, right? So the Eastwood, this is like the 8-inch draw. It's almost perfectly made for doing edge rolling. So when you want to make these steps, you don't need a big depth and draw. You're not doing the big artistry stuff, or you're not pushing into like a big wide panel. You're just going to do these edges. This tool is practically made for it. And while you don't have a table, you know, that kind of helps with that. You know, these, as long as the panel is not like 8 feet long, you know, and you're able to just, you know, kind of maybe hold this thing by hand, it's perfect for panels like this that are small and just need a little bit of reinforcement. What I like about it is it's compact. It's got a nice thick piece of steel here so it doesn't wobble, right? Some of the other versions of these, both made by Eastwood and other folks, they're a little wider and they don't take to 18 gauge really too well. They kind of twist up a little bit. And well, that's just a challenge. So I got this shorter one to kind of compensate for that. But one of the things that I don't really care for and I'm just being bluntly honest here, is these dies, well, these dies don't have any radius on them. They got a little bit of machine, they have a chamfer, sure, but there's no radius. And really, when you look at some of these other step rolls, there's a nice radius on them. And I only started to really think about this as I made this panel. And I'm going to show you, man, I gouged the heck out of this one panel, you know, knowing this is my first effort, but I put a couple of these deep gouges in here, and this was, you know, 3 or 4 passes to get this sort of draw. And that tight edge, well, it just worked the panel in a way I didn't really like. And yeah, you can blend all that stuff out. It's not so deep that you can't blend it out with, you know, with some abrasives. You know what? I cannot leave well enough alone. So I put the rollers on there that I used, and I put a radius on them. And I got something I need to make now that uses a different depth roller, and I'm going to show you how I made that radius. It's really very simple. So you just need to put together a couple of specific tools. I got a 4mm Allen head. I got my drill with a 16mm socket, and a selection of files. And this is just to be able to swap over the different rollers. So here's what we're gonna look at for the end. We're gonna have a nice chamfer here, here, and here, and we're gonna duplicate this on both rollers. I'm gonna show you the mistakes I made too when I did this the first time. Hint, it has to do with take off these little guys, because once you get this thing spinning, it doesn't want to stop. When you get these tools, here's something that's in common across all of these things. First of all, you got to assemble the English wheel, right? So that's kind of number one. Everything is loose, 100% of it, and you've got to do all the adjustments. And that's not, I'm not saying that to complain, but just don't think that this is an out-of-the-box kind of deal to where you're able to go and immediately start using it. But also, these tools tend to sit for a while too. And if you don't give them anti-seize that time that they sit, that may be all that set screw needs to set up and not want to move anymore. So take this thing out before you hurt yourself. You know what? Almost forgot. So hey, that's about it. All I wanted to do was show you what was within our reach with some pretty regular tools and maybe a little modifications to suit you as the builder, and to recognize that, like, go spend your money on the speed parts that you need for your car or your truck or whatever, and then what you save, you can apply and get really high value tools here, but make them suit you. And look, I'm not sure if this is really terribly useful for y'all. Just let me know. Use the comments. Tell me if you want to see more of this type of stuff, and we'll make more of these videos. If this one does well, there's plenty of other types of tools in here that have been modified that I think we can walk through on another future episode. But appreciate you being here, and until next time, take care.